Well, good morning, everybody. Although I guess in this strange day and age of doing my sermons online, it could be possibly good afternoon, good evening, good night, good some other time of day. My name's Steve. I'm the vicar of Trendlewood Church. Welcome to Trendlewood Church's website and welcome to our sermon spot. The advantage for most people listening to sermons is that you can disappear fairly promptly if you're not enjoying what's going on. I'm not going to be as long as I often am in the school where we meet, but I'm going to be a few minutes just looking at Jesus as he is described in Colossians chapter 1 and verses 15 to 24. Those who hear me preach regularly know my great chunky and battered Bible, which I'm often holding when I'm speaking. It's strange, isn't it, doing a lockdown sermon sitting in my office. I guess you're all wondering what that door is and who's going to come through it. Well, I hope no one's going to come through it because I haven't locked anybody in the garage, but that's where it is. It's the garage door, and this is my little quiet working space. Normally people don't get to come in here. It's a little bit higgledy-piggledy, but I know where everything is, and so I like to keep it that way. It is clean, even if it's not particularly tidy. When Paul wrote to the Colossian Christians, he gave them an unbelievable perspective on holding things all together. And I've been thinking about perspective this week and holding things all together. There's been a street party where everybody was socially distanced and we walked around and spoke to each other but kept apart. People sat in their front garden, some of us wandered down the street and said hello. We got perspective on the local, the detail. And another Steve, who led some music for us yesterday, said to everybody at the end, if we've learned anything from this lockdown, it is that we should do this more often. We should get together outside in the front garden rather than the back garden more often. And we all agreed it was lovely, it was good fun. But equally, if I want to get a really good perspective on feeling part of something bigger, if I go upstairs in my house and look out the bedroom window, I can see beyond the cul-de-sac opposite me and right over to the Chiltern Hills. I can see Backwell Church. I can see the planes landing at the airport when they're landing at the airport. And it gives me a perspective on being part of a bigger place. I don't feel quite so enclosed or squashed on our estate, lovely as it is. So getting perspective, who am I, where am I, what am I doing in this specific place, how am I part of something bigger, is really important. And the Bible can feel so much, there's so much stuff going on about God, so many different perspectives, that holding it together in one person, as Paul says, is astonishing. When John's Gospel says that the Word, the Logos, God, became flesh and dwelt amongst us, he's saying the same thing as Paul says when he says that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. If you want to know what God's like, if you want to get perspective on God, look at Jesus, look at what he did, look at what he said, and remember the ultimate miracle of which Paul speaks, that he appeared to people beyond the grave and therefore was described as alive and resurrected. If that hadn't happened, Paul says he wouldn't have been preaching, he wouldn't have been changed, he'd still have been persecuting Christians. And there are lots of people out there who want to distort our perspective. You might have seen some pictures in the paper saying, look at these idiots not socially distanced. And then someone takes the photograph apart with correct parallax, I think that's the right word, and you discover that the people who looked like they weren't socially distanced when the photograph is taken from along the ground, if you took a picture from a drone, you'd find they're standing in family groups and they're quite a long way apart. We simply don't get the perspective by just looking from one place. And we want to get the right perspective on being Christians and living as people of faith in Jesus Christ and understanding God. And trying to understand God, who is so distant and so unknowable that he's beyond my bedroom window, beyond the airport, beyond Somerset. He's simply beyond, is beyond my ability to comprehend. Even the stories of the Old Testament, which we've been reading in morning prayer this week, in Exodus, every now and again God allows some of the heroes of the faith a sort of gripping glimpse of his glory. I just wrote myself a tongue twister, I'll have another go. Gripping glimpse of his glory. I'm going to pass by, but you'll only see the back of my head, he says to Moses on the mountain. Every now and again we get that. But the Bible focuses its perspective on these amazing passages in John's Gospel, when Paul writes to the Philippians in chapter 2, and when he writes to the Colossians here in chapter 1, and says, Jesus, the image of the invisible God, before all things, and in him all things hold together. He holds all perspectives together. He is the one who is the key to understanding life. If you want to get a grip on your life, local and wider, its perspective and its meaning, then Jesus risen from the dead, says Paul, this is the gospel you heard, and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant. It gives us the right view in a world where lots of people are trying to confuse our view, or help us to ask us to look at things from a different point of view, when that point of view unravels when you try and sort it out. So please take that as your sustenance, if you like, this week, that Jesus holds all things together and is worth looking at, and is worth looking at the rest of the world through. He even holds together this messy study with all its different bits and pieces that look as if no one could possibly understand. But trust me, I do. And Jesus understands you and how you hold together. And I'm relieved that nobody came in through the garage door, because that would have scared us all.